Yes, thank you, Victoria. So, hello, everybody. So, as Victoria said, I was had the opportunity of being part of the Pathways to Innovation program, and it was truly a great experience. And that's why I always like to share my experiences whenever Victoria gives me the opportunity to do so. So, thank you again, Victoria. Um, I guess before we start, we just want to put a few rules in place. And one of the major things when you ask people to contribute to any project and to share their ideas, one of the really important things is to create and maintain a safe space for focused conversation. And what we primarily mean by that, Elena, could we go to the next slide? Is that obviously everybody has to be present, but the most important thing is just be respectful of each other's ideas. And I know a lot of the times when people talk, we feel that, oh, well, that's not a good idea. But just the most important thing is just hold your thought and do not judge and do not critique people's ideas until all the ideas are laid out on the table, because otherwise, typically what you're going to see is um, if you tend to jump the gun and say that, oh, but that's not a good idea, that person's just going to shut down, and then it's going to be practically impossible to get the person to open up again and contribute with meaningful ideas. So the whole purpose, or the whole, I guess, focus of rule number one is that all ideas are valid. There's no such thing as a bad idea. And in these kind of brainstorming sessions, we obviously want to be respectful of each other's ideas and listen to understand, not just hear the person, but understand what they're trying to say. Okay, next slide.
Coming, here it is. So the very first thing that we do after we've done this norming and everybody feels safe in their space is framing the conversation around what's called an appreciative question. And could we just go to the next slide, please, Elena? And the whole idea of appreciative question is that you frame this around something that's positive. I know that I've been in many conversations on campuses that are negative. You know, oh, we can't do that. That's never worked. We've tried that. And I think instead we've got to frame it around the positive, because when you do frame it around the positive, you're putting out there the direction that you want to go in. You want to go in a positive direction. So that's what we're going to do today. If you don't decide to use this process on your own campus, you may choose a different framing question. This is the framing question that we've chosen today just because it cuts across, I think, most people that are part of the Keen network and what they're driving after. So our framing question is, imagine if your engineering classes and programs instilled and rewarded student curiosity and the creation of value for others. What would that look like? So that's something we're going to be pondering today throughout this entire process. You'll see a couple of things across the top. It talks about a knowledge keeper and a table guide. We're not going to have table guides today because unfortunately there isn't, oh actually I think we do have one exception. Gary has experience. Typically a table guide is somebody that has past experience doing this work. So Gary, we're looking to you to guide your table through this process. But for the rest of you, Jimmy and I are really going to serve that purpose. But there also needs to be a knowledge keeper. So we need somebody that's really going to commit to your team to keeping track of what you discuss and the decisions that you make, and hopefully somebody with better handwriting than mine, because you'll need to read this later. So if you could just select your knowledge keeper now, that would be fantastic. Okay, and I think we are ready for the next slide.
Okay, so this is probably one of the most important pieces, right? That uncovering your hidden assets that people are willing to share. And what do we exactly mean by assets? Elena, if we could go to the next slide. So this was an interesting quote that my greatest political asset, which professional politicians fear, is my mouth, right? Out of which come all kind of things that one shouldn't always discuss for reasons of political expediency. Again, so your ideas that you come up with, obviously that's one of your greatest assets, because without ideas, nothing's going to happen. Elena, could we move to the next slide, please? This is a really important chart. So what are the different types of assets that you could bring to the table? It could be physical assets, as in space, equipment, It could be skills, somebody who knows how to teach a certain class, somebody who has experience teaching an innovation and an entrepreneurship class. Social skills, where you have a connection with a dean, a department chair, where you can have that contact to get access to the person and get them to listen to your ideas, convince them to your ideas. Because a lot of the times, in my experience, when we talk about the social aspect, the relationship that you have already built with a certain person is so key, and that's truly an asset that you can exploit when you're a part of strategic doing. And then, of course, the capital assets is if you have access to some line of funding, which, of course, as we all know, we are all always looking for. There's never enough money, and capital assets is always something that we always need more of. So these are the four broad categories of assets that you should try and bring to the table. And we don't want to try and focus only on one type. We want to make sure that we try and bring, if possible, all four of these different types of assets to the table. Because if you truly want to see results, only if you bring all four of these type of assets to the table, you're going to be able to see tangible results. Next slide, please, Elena. So this is just an example that what are some of the assets that might be valuable building blocks, and what are you willing to share? So on your sheet, if you could, you can take about 5 minutes, and Victoria will time you. So just put down the person who comes up with ideas and what is the asset that they are bringing to the table. So if you could just make a list of that, that would be great. And Victoria will give you about 5 minutes, Victoria?
That sounds perfect. Yeah. So the goal here is list as many assets as you possibly can.
Mhm.
All of the different things that you think you might contribute to this project. The more assets you have, the more creative you can be later. All right. So 5 minutes starting now. Okay, pens down, people. We're going to move on to the next thing. So hopefully, each of the teams has just a plethora of assets that they can bring to bear for this next stage. So Elena, could we move on to the next slide, please? So here we're moving on to rule 4, link and leverage your assets. And something I haven't yet mentioned about strategic doing, it was originally designed for regional economic development. So really for bringing together a diverse group of people to work on a regional problem. And so this is where the asset idea originally came from. And so what we're going to find next is the more assets you have, the more creative you can be and the more options you have for implementing new opportunities. So if we go to the next slide, please, Elena. So what we're going to do now, we're going to have about 10 minutes for you to take a look at all of those fabulous assets that you have and come up with some different opportunities. So 3 exciting things that you think you might do using any combination of the assets. You don't have to use them all, but you can use any number of them in whatever kinds of creative ways you want. And I'd love for you to list at least 3 exciting opportunities. If you have more, then power to you. So we're just going to dive right back in. So pens and thinking caps at the ready. We're going to put 10 more minutes on the clock for this one. And as I mentioned, if questions do come up as you're working away in your group, please do feel free to post them into the control panel, and Jimmy and I can respond to them via text. Okay, all right, off you go. I'm going to set my timer again.